It's All Saints' Day, and in this devoutly Roman Catholic country, the churches are packed. Suddenly, without warning, all hell breaks loose as a devastating earthquake destroys this great city. An earthquake so powerful that its shockwaves can be felt all over Europe, North Africa, and even across the Atlantic. Within seconds, tens of thousands of people lie dead or lie dying as Lisbon is reduced to rubble in an 18th century equivalent of a nuclear holocaust. 10 minutes after the quake, gigantic tsunamis 20 meters tall hit North Africa and the coasts of Europe, causing more death and devastation. Voltaire, a philosopher of the time, stunned and horrified by what had happened, asked, "How can anyone believe in a benevolent and omnipotent God after this?" A question that had been asked many times before, and one that has been asked many times since.
I shall never forget Auschwitz, a death camp that forever murdered my God and turned my dreams to dust. Never shall I forget those things I saw. Never shall I forget. Blessed be God's name. Blessed because in His great might He created Auschwitz and so many other factories of death. Blessed because He caused millions of human beings to die in His mass graves or burn in His crematoriums. How could I bless Him as an almighty loving Master of the universe? How could I bless Him as our parents, brothers, sisters, and children were tortured and slaughtered day and night? Every fibre in me rebels. Either God wants to abolish evil and cannot, or He can but does not want to. If He wants to but cannot, He is impotent. If He can but does not want to, He is wicked. If God can abolish evil and God really wants to do it, why is there evil in the world?
There's no greater challenge to religious belief than the problem of evil. A problem sometimes philosophically presented as a logically inconsistent triad of propositions, whereby the three statements, God is all-loving, God is all-powerful, evil exists, can't logically all exist together.
God is all-powerful. God is all-loving, and yet evil exists. There seems to be a contradiction between these three propositions, so that if any two of them were true, the third would be false. But at the same time, all three are essential parts of most theistic positions.
This contradiction can be resolved by modifying or denying any one of these three propositions. By, for example, claiming that God isn't all-loving, or God isn't all-powerful, or evil doesn't exist. But if the three propositions remain in place as they are, and as traditional Christian theism maintains, then the existence of evil poses a serious challenge to the belief that God is both omnipotent and benevolent.
In sober truth, Nearly all the things which men are hanged or imprisoned for doing to one another are nature's everyday performances. Killing, the most criminal act recognized by human nature, nature does once to every being that lives, and in a large proportion of cases, after protracted tortures. All this nature does with the most supercilious disregard both of mercy and of justice, emptying her shafts upon the best and noblest indifferently with the meanest and worst. I will call no being good who is not what I mean when I apply that epithet to my fellow creatures, and if such a being can sentence me to hell for not so calling him good, to hell I will go.
This concentration camp was overrun by American troops in April. German civilians are forced to dig up the bodies. This is the second burial ground for the victims. The spot where they were originally buried after the massacre was apparently too close to the town. The Arnstadt villagers could not tolerate the stench of the dead, and they themselves moved the bodies to this site. Now they again must exhume the corpses, this time under armed persuasion. 1,200 civilians walked from the neighboring city of Weimar to begin a forced tour of the camp. There are many smiling faces, and according to observers, at first the Germans act as though this was something being staged for their benefit. One of the first things that the German civilians see as they reach the interior of the camp is the parchment display. On a table for all to gaze upon is a lampshade made of human skin, made at the request of an SS officer's wife. Large pieces of skin have been used for painting pictures, many of an obscene nature. There are 2 heads which have been shrunk to 1/5 their normal size. These and other exhibits of Nazi origin are shown to the townspeople. The tour continues with a forced inspection of the camp's living quarters, where the stench, filth, and misery defied description. Correspondents assigned to the Buchenwald story have given wide notice to the well-fed, well-dressed appearance of the German civilian population of the Weimar area. Other evidences of horror, brutality, and human indecency are shown, and these people are compelled to see what their own government had perpetrated. The camera records the changes in facial expressions as the Weimar citizens leave the parchment display.
Can a world in which sadistic cruelty often has its way, in which selfish lovelessness is so rife, in which there are debilitating diseases, crippling accidents, bodily and mental decay, insanity, and all manner of natural disasters, be regarded as the expression of infinite creative goodness? Certainly, all this could never, by itself, lead anyone to believe in the existence of a limitlessly loving and powerful God. And yet, even in a world which contains these things, innumerable men and women believe in the reality of an infinite creative goodness, which they call God.
In order to have their belief in the existence of a benevolent and omnipotent God taken seriously, theists need to justify God's existence in light of the existence of evil in the world. Such a justification is called a theodicy, a word originating from the Greek words theos, God, and dike, justice. Anyone who attempts to justify God's existence in the face of evil, however, faces difficult questions. Could God accomplish his purpose without the magnitude and immensity of suffering that exists? Suffering seemingly so unfairly distributed? Is any divine purpose justified by horrendous suffering? Is a God who works in this way worthy of worship? Should one even speak of justifying such a being's existence? Any theodicy, therefore, needs to be philosophically coherent, credible, and consistent with scientific laws and acceptable to the religious tradition in which it's grounded. But more importantly, any theodicy needs to be sensitive to the fact that it's essentially dealing with real people, real suffering, and real pain.
Philosophizing about the problem of evil has become commonplace, and theodicies abound. However, such philosophizing should always be done in fear and trembling. Fear that in our philosophizing we'll betray the evils people suffer and have suffered, and trembling because betrayal occurs every time explanations and justifications of evil are offered which are simplistic, incredible, or obscene.